Okay. What's up, y'all? What's up? I hope you are well. I hope this message reaches you in the best of spirit and health and mind and all that great stuff. Welcome to the Brown Mama Blueprint podcast. Again, it's me, your girl Muffy Mendoza, the host of the show. And this is our interview segment, or this is the time when we are going to be speaking with Black women from all over the country who are doing the real work of helping us shift our mindsets, helping us to heal, sharing their stories in authenticity, and giving us the value that we need, the currency that we need to begin our own journeys of healing ourselves and also subsequently healing our men, healing our families and our communities. So today with me, I have Naijama Small. Did I say your name correctly?
Naijama.
Naijama. See, y'all know I'm always messing up these names. I'm always. This
There.
is the worst thing in the world about being a sister who got a white name. Because it's like you don't develop the mouth necessities to be able to say your sister's names right. So Naijima Smalls. I've been on Naijima's mailing list for probably about a year and a half, and I'm always reading her articles that she posts in her email newsletter, and I'm always loving the content, loving seeing how her healing journey is oftentimes paralleling my own, loving the transparency with which she shares herself and her soul. And so I was like, I need to get this lady on to the Brown Mama Blueprint podcast before the end of the year. So that's what I did. I reached out and she was like, all right. And we made it happen. So welcome, 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 Naijama.
Thank you. And thank you for all those kind words, Muffy. I'm so excited to be here and chat with you and your audience.
I'm so excited to have you here. So Naijama wrote a book. It's called Emotional Wounds, Healing the Emotional Wounds of Black Women.
The Black Girl's Guide to Healing Emotional
A
Wounds.
Black Girl's Guide to Healing Emotional Wounds. And I haven't read the whole book, but she sent an excerpt out in her email newsletter a few months ago, and I read it and I was like, wow, I was blown away. So, can you tell us just a little bit about this book, about your story? And y'all know I'm a sucker for stories. So, I love when women, because to me, it takes a lot to tell your story and to be fully transparent with the world, not just with a group of people, but with the world. So can you tell us a little bit about the catalyst to writing this book?
Sure. So I believe the catalyst for me, and I'm just putting it out there in very blatant terms, was I got sick and tired, right? I looked around and I realized I didn't have long-term friendships of substance. And I realized that, things were affecting my marriage. And the common denominator in those scenarios were me. And even at work, I was having drama at work and I was like, okay, something's off. It
Mm.
can't be them each and every time, right? And so I started to doing the work. And when I say the work, I mean going to therapy. I probably read every self-help book under the sun. Um, I started meditating, just taking the time to get to know me, understand how I'm wired. I started, attending church and reading some of the scriptures and so on, and just matching them up to how I moved and so on. And I realized that I had some things that I had to work on internally. I had mommy issues, I had daddy issues, dealing with rejection, dealing with how I perceived authority and so on. And some of it I had just plain ignorance because I didn't know, right? And when I say ignorance, I'm talking about, for example, I was raised by my mom, and I talk about this in the book. I was raised by my mom. She was a single mom for the bulk of my teenage years. And because my father wasn't in my life, I didn't really understand the needs of a man in terms of a romantic relationship, right? And even when my mother was married to my stepfather, love my mom, this isn't to disparage her, but she wasn't the best role model. She did a lot of arguing and fighting, right? Mom has her own issues that she has to work out. So when I got married, that's how I thought issues were resolved, was through conflict. And so that's just kind of what I mean by the ignorance. There were things I just didn't know because certain things were missing from my life. And so that's when I had to do, I started to doing all of the hard work. And so the book came when I wanted to share my journey with other sisters, because it would come up in conversations with some of my girlfriends. And I felt like some of them were going through some of the same things that I was going through. And then, I would see some things at work with some of my, younger employees that were Black and Black women. And so I was just like, let me just put this out there. And I had no clue that it would just become what it is becoming. I didn't know, I get people, women that email me, they DM me on social media and just say, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. And if you read the book, out there, you know that I share a lot. I kind of put it all out there. And they're like, thank you for sharing. It was so relatable. I get it. This has really been helpful to me, and so on. So that's kind of how I got here.
So I'm really interested because being a woman, so much of what you talk about is just so relatable. It's like it's what we're all going through, specifically when you mentioned not being able to make female friends,
Hmm.
not, what I'm saying, recognizing that you're consistently having these arguments with your mate, with your partner, that are not being resolved. Like it's like you're putting a band-aid on it. Can you tell us about some of the things that were happening up until this point where you decided to start doing the healing? Like give us some of the triggers to your healing. How did you get the courage to actually start the work? Because that's the hardest part, is getting the courage to actually do it.
Yes. Oh, yes. I completely agree with you on that. I think some of the things that triggered me was a conversation I had with my husband. And, he sat me down and we had a very serious conversation. And I can tell by the look in his face, he was like, I can't take this. Like, this
Mm,
isn't what I signed up for. And I knew it was serious. Then, in addition to that, I had really lost some girlfriends that I really cared for. And when I look back and was able to take my emotions out of it, I could easily see where I was the problem. Sometimes it maybe my intentions were good to deliver some news, but it was in such a harsh manner. And I remember one time I was driving in my car, and I said to myself, if someone said to me what I said to her, I'd be crushed. I wouldn't even want to be friends with me. And I think that's a big thing we have to ask ourselves. Like, do we want to be our friends? Like, if do we want a friend to behave the way we're behaving to other friends? Yeah. And I watched other people, and I wanted to be that girl that had the best friend, or the friend group or whatever. But I just suffered. Like, I just couldn't I just couldn't master it. And then I think when I had my daughter, I wanted more for her. I really wanted to break the generational curses. Um, because here's the thing, ladies. One of the things I realized, and this was a big part of me bettering relationships with my mom. I had to realize that our parents, right? They were born at a very different time than what we were born at, right? They didn't have all the resources that we had. They didn't have the conversations that we're able to have. They didn't have the Brown Mamas podcast to listen to and get knowledge, right? And then also at that time, they were just so focused on surviving, right? We're able to thrive now. They
mhm,
were they were focused on, listen, if I got food on your table, you got food on your table, you got a roof over your house, you go to good school. I've done my part, right? And so I wanted so much more from my daughter, because I felt like there were so many other things I could have gotten from a mother-daughter relationship that would have helped me in my relationships with other women that I wasn't able to get. So I wanted to be a whole woman for
yeah.
my daughter, not only for myself, definitely for myself first and foremost, but for my daughter especially, and for my son as well. I don't want him going out here and looking for drama in his relationships. I wanted him to see that, I don't want him to grow up thinking women are crazy. And just always, going off and acting crazy. I wanted him to see wholeness and emotional stability
Mhm.
as well in his life. So,
And if you've been following the Brown Mama Blueprint podcast, you know that our program that we offer is actually called the Whole Woman Work Program. So
mhm,
this Black Girls Guide to Emotional to Healing Emotional Wounds is so in alignment with this concept, like you said, of you got to be willing to do the whole woman work. You got to be willing to take a 360 degrees look at everything and pinpoint where you're the problem. And it's not that you might be that everything about you is bad
Mhm.
as much as it is most of the time we are setting ourselves up for failure and we don't even know it.
It's very true.
We don't even know. We're not even aware that the reason why the friend didn't stay was because of something we said or something we did or something that, and it's I think what I love about you and what you're doing is you're normalizing the healing process. Because
I
I
love.
think for such a long time, like you said, our moms were so focused on surviving that to even think about thriving was like taboo, you
Mhm.
know? So you didn't even consider. I know a lot of times, and I don't know if you've had this same experience talking to the older women in my family, like sometimes they're not even willing to confront or think about or talk about their issues.
It's so interesting that you say that because a chapter in the book, I talk about a family secret, right?
Mhm.
And
Give it
even
to us.
though,
Come on.
let me tell you, Muffy, I went to my mom beforehand and I told her about it. I said, Mom, I'm gonna put this in the book. And I think, it's something when you say something and then when you see it in black and white, I think it hits different.
Yeah.
So my mom didn't talk to me for several months. It was lots of confusion in the family. But the biggest thing, I put that in there not to hurt anybody. I wanted that generation to heal. I really did. So I love that you said that that was poetry, normalizing the healing process for that generation. It
Didn't.
takes a lot, and because my mom will call myself and my sister, because my sister does healing work as well, and she'll say, y'all sharing too much, because we were raised in that you don't tell the family business.
You don't.
Y'all
You're not
tell everything. Yeah. I'm glad, because I do think our generation and the generations after us, they are going to start, they are a part of healing the process. I don't know about the generations before them, because this is a lot for them. This is, this is intense for them. I think they're just getting comfortable with going to therapists.
Yeah.
Whereas me and my girlfriends, we'll call each other in a minute. You got a therapist? I need a new therapist. What's your, in
Mhm.
a minute. It's nothing to say you're going to a therapist now.
Yeah, and it's
But
beautiful.
it's beautiful. Exactly. Isn't it? Yes. Yes.
People to know that if my sister can't come to me and talk to me about something, she has someone she can talk to about it. And I think we have to start thinking about our lives in terms of the quality of our lives versus the longevity of our lives. I think a lot of times we think about, how long we're going to live instead of thinking about like what is that going to look like, what is
Mm,
it going to look like for me to make it to 65, what is it going to
mhm.
make look like for me to make it to 80, am I still going to be sitting here as the same person I was when I was 25 when I'm 65?
Okay.
What
And I
can I
was a
look
mess at 25, because I don't want that.
right? It's like, but I feel like so many of our elders, they got stunted at some point. Like
Mhm,
there became a point where they were so focused on the day-to-day surviving, getting to 65, that
mhm,
they didn't think about, well, when I get to 65, am I going to be happy? Am I going to be content? Am I going to be doing the things that I want to do in life? And
mhm.
so much of that is doing the mental healing, emotional, spiritual, intellectual work.
Right.
The Black Girl's Guide to Healing Emotional Wounds is like step number one.
Right. Exactly.
Let me let you know that you're not alone in this process. Let
Mhm,
me let you know that there are tools, because
mhm.
books are tools, y'all.
Yes. Yes.
They
Yes.
are tools. That's why some people have a million of them, because it's like you're trying to fill up your arsenal so that when you have a problem, you could be like, oh, let me go pull out this book. Let me go pull out this workshop. Let me go pull out this podcast so that I can get my life?
Mhm,
So we
mhm.
got to start thinking about the quality of our lives and don't be ashamed
Yes.
to put stuff in there.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And when you talked about having the courage to do this healing work, because it does take a lot of courage,
Mm.
because you're being vulnerable first and foremost with yourself, right? And some of us haven't done that.
Yes.
And some of us haven't taken a real hard look at who we are and how we're showing up. And I like that you talked about, self-sabotage. Let me tell you, I was the queen of self sabotage. I would self sabotage myself at work, in my career, and I had to. I got to the point where it was like, it's me. It's I need to look at how I am showing up because I can't control anybody else,
Mm.
And the thing about life is, if you don't fix that issue, you can run to the next job, you can run to the next boyfriend, you can run to the next partner, whatever it is, but until you fix you, that thing is going to show up
Yep.
again and again and again. That's why you have people changing partners, changing careers, changing this, that, because they haven't dealt with themselves yet.
Mm. And speaking of that, so I want to talk a little bit about something you touched on earlier
Mhm,
about understanding the needs of our men, of
mhm,
our partners, and
mhm,
how that is a part of the healing process. And I want to tag on to that, not only understanding the needs, but also understanding, because you said something interesting. You said, because I grew up with a single mom, and my mom I had a stepdad, but
mhm,
my mom wasn't necessarily a good facilitator of that relationship. So it comes into not only not understanding the needs of men, but also maybe not understanding the proper function
mhm.
of men. So I would like you to chime in a little bit on that in terms of, the book and how you're dealing with that with the women who are reading the book.
I think that we all have to ask ourselves, are we bringing toxic learned behavior
Mm.
into our relationships? And that's kind of what I was doing. And I would tell you, Muffy, it wasn't until I was at a church service and I heard the pastor say, men perceive love. They perceive respect as love.
Mm.
Love and respect go hand in hand. And I can remember that, um, when I was dating, right? And I would just be disrespectful to guys. If they didn't do something that I wanted them to do, or I didn't get my way, or whatever the case is, I would act out and behave very disrespectfully. And then I would, I would be surprised when they would be upset or like, this isn't for me. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? You need to get over it, right? And I didn't know that. So it was like the light bulb went off when I heard that.
Mm.
And men don't communicate as much as we do. I think women, we're much better at communicating our needs for the most part, whereas men, I don't know if they are comfortable yet. And I hate to generalize all of them, but in
Oh, black men, true.
yeah,
Mhm.
in communicating their needs. So that's why I believe that it's important that we have role models around us. And growing up, I didn't have many to show us, um, this is what a healthy relationship looks like. This is what healthy conflict looks like, right? And that's the thing. Conflict is going to happen in any type of relationship. It's how you handle the conflict that makes the difference. And so I had to learn how to be able to communicate without an attitude, without being hurtful
Mm.
to my partners, not just in my marriage, but just in general. I had to really, that's learned behavior for me, is how to communicate and not hurt the other person, but communicate in a way in which they receive it and we have a dialogue. And I had to understand that just because there's conflict doesn't mean the world is going to blow up. If you learn how to handle it and handle it well, you can be successful. And so here we are 14 years later. We're still happily married, and I hope, my prayer every day is that our kids see what a healthy relationship looks like. That is my prayer. And we have conflict in front of them.
Yep.
We don't hide it, because they need to understand you're going to have conflict. But
Mhm.
here, Here's how we do it. Mommy listens, daddy talk, daddy listens, mommy talk, and we come to some type of conclusion. We don't slam doors, we don't kick each other out, we don't do all of that, but we hash it out. And there's sometimes when one of us will say, I need to process this. Give me some time. I need to process this. And I've learned that's okay.
Mhm.
I'm the type of person, I like to have it out right then and there. I like to talk it out. I want to get it out of my head because it'll bother me if there's something there. Whereas my husband I'm a processor. Let me think it through first. And I
Mhm.
had to learn to be okay with that, giving him his space to go, in the room or whatever. If it takes a day, 2 days, that's fine. But let me give him his chance to deal with it and process it.
Absolutely. And I think that because I've been married, well, I'm right behind you. We'll have been married for 13 years this coming May. And I think that when you are raised by a single parent, there's just such a breakdown of learning good communication skills. Because
Mhm.
I know one of the things that resonated most with me when I first got married was that my mom had said to me, she said, Muffy, you're not a single mom. You don't have to run your household like a single mom. And
Mm,
I never even realized that that's what I was doing, but it was what I was doing because I was just, that was what I knew. And to add to that, I'd been a single mom before I got married.
mhm,
So I was used to running my household like that. And so I really had to develop some processes to put in place to stop myself from basically my default communication methodology, which was it's my way or the highway.
mhm,
And that's a part of the healing process. It's a part of the healing process to really, like you said, it's a 360-degree look at yourself, and being able to make those connections between where you feel like you are interacting with the world in a way that is defending yourself, but in reality what you're doing is building up a wall
mhm,
yourself that keeps you from interacting in positive ways so that you're able to benefit from your relationships in real ways that help you to sustain a healthy lifestyle.
mhm.
So it's beautiful to see other couples doing this work. Um, and then I wanted to talk a little bit about parenting because you mentioned your daughter.
Mhm.
And I don't have daughters. I have all sons. Jesus.
Boy, mom.
I'm a boy mom. I wish I had a girl, but I don't. But nonetheless, I feel like the work that you are doing is the work that every mom owes it to her daughter to do.
Mhm,
And especially when you recognize, like you said, raised by a single parent, didn't
mhm,
necessarily have the best outcomes in life in terms of the relationships.
mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about that. What does this work that you're doing look like in terms of how it is translating positive relationship modalities to your daughter?
So one of the things you mentioned, you were talking about being raised by a single mom, and um, I was raised by a single mom, and then my grandmother, even though she was married, my grandmother was very much so kind of the head of the house. Like she was like the godfather. Anybody needed anything, they had to come through her, right? And when you talk about that my way or the highway, that's one of the things I had to kind of break down, right? Because I think when you've been accustomed to the single mom and you've seen that, you get into that mindset, right? And because I think, especially for single moms, they're managing so many things that it's like, look, we got to do it this way. I don't have time to explain it to you and go into all the details and sit down and negotiate. We just got to do it this way. And so that's one of the things I learned. My daughter and I, we have very open communication, very open. And she's only 8 years old, but I let both of my kids know that they are able to ask me any question in the world. Now I'm gonna give you the truth, so be prepared. Um, but you can ask me anything because there were so many times I didn't feel like I could come to anybody in my family, any of the older folks in my family about anything, especially when it came down to sex and relationships.
Yep.
Because in my house, it was don't have sex, and if you do, don't get pregnant.
Right? That was it.
And also there was so much shame attached to sex. And that's one of the big things I'm doing with my kids is I'm trying to remove the shame from sex. I want you to understand responsible sex, right? I definitely want you to get that. But I don't want there to be this shame attached to it because God created sex.
Right.
Sex is good, right? And so I don't want them to go through life with this, about sex. So I've started being very vulnerable. I started having open conversations, and I started caring about their emotional needs.
Mhm.
And having a lot of compassion. And that's what I felt I didn't get, was a lot of empathy and compassion from my family. Just because they were so focused on that, you know, we got to do this. You got, it was, especially my mom was a tough mom. It was,
Mm.
you didn't have chance to mess up.
Nope.
You were gonna hear it. So she was real tough. So it wasn't a lot of empathy. So I parent with a whole lot of empathy, and I try to understand their perspective. What caused you to do XYZ? What are you thinking? I'm just trying to get into their head, and I'm trying to build the open communication now so that when they're teenagers, when we get to that teenager and the iffy young adult part, that hopefully they'll feel comfortable enough to coming to me. Because what happens when we don't feel comfortable with coming to our family? We go to our friends, and what can friends tell you?
Good or correct.
Exactly. And that's what, a lot of things I learned from my friends. She said, do this. I saw her do that. And he said, do this. And you end up with a mess. And
Mhm.
so that's part of where my parenting style kind of comes from. Now, I get a lot of criticism from my mom on my parenting style, even to this day. She's like, those kids just do this, and they say whatever to you, and one thing my mom has to realize, this is my household.
And it's really, I mean, I feel like we have to be patient with ourselves because the reality is that every generation has something, should have a way in which it is leveling up the culture with which it sustains itself in, right? So
Mhm.
you have to recognize that there are going to be some things that you're going to do that are not going to be right.
Right.
It's just going to be wrong. It is
Yeah,
what it is.
absolutely.
And then there's going to be some ways in which you get it right. But what I always like to tell people, because a big part of what I do is helping people to reconnect to their original African culture, is realizing that from an African lens, time is. And whatever good works God does not finish in you, he will finish in your children. So
That's right.
allow yourself to make the mistakes. Allow yourself to go out on a limb. But I always say parenting is the perfect experiment if you have a scientific mind, if you have a mind that is an analytical mind. It's the perfect experiment. Try some stuff, see if it works. If it doesn't, apologize, like, I did this wrong, I'm sorry, I didn't know, and learn from your mistakes. But we have to find ways to balance kind of like this hardness that we were raised with the new empathy that we're learning. And
Mhm,
it's not always gonna look perfect. And
mhm,
I know, I remember one of the newsletters you sent out, and you were talking about that,
mhm.
like balancing the fact that you didn't get affection with what you want to do with your own kids. How is that manifesting itself now? Like, how do you bring yourself to this place? Because I know what me, one of the things I had to confront when I first got married and had more children was I didn't like being touched.
Mhm.
My husband loves being touched. I did not want to be touched. So how do you balance that?
I think it's so interesting that sometimes we marry people that are the opposites with
Yeah.
us, because I think, like you said, we're still doing the work. We're still finishing up the work. So I think he's put in your life to bring some things out of you, and help you, level some things out. I think for me, forgive me. I think for
So
me,
I will tell you, Najima, on this podcast, I always tell people, if you hear kids, so what? It say mama. And so you should know there's moms talking. So if there's kids come in a room, if my kids come in, I try not to have them come interrupt me. But if they do, mind your business.
like, and I had the door closed. I don't know where he came from.
You know, they just open the door, come
Um,
on in.
exactly. But thank you for that. Thank you for your grace on that. So for me, with I try to be as affectionate as I can, because like I didn't get a lot of affection, as I said, in my house growing up. And so we hug, we kiss. I'll just go in my room and I'll just to my daughter's arm, just because I read somewhere that there are healing powers in touch
Mm-hmm.
when and my husband and I we'll lay in the bed and just hold hands some night, or we'll
Yes.
just caress each other. And so now he was more like you. He was like, ooh, there's a little bit too much
Mm-hmm.
touchiness going on. But we are that fam. We have become that family. I mean, my daughter and I will lay in the bed and watch a movie. And her legs will be on top of my legs or whatever, just cuddled up. And especially I feel like when they're young, we don't get this much time to do this.
Yeah.
I'm trying to prepare myself when they're locked in the room and teenagers and don't want to be bothered with
Yeah,
with them.
because I have an 18-year-old, and let me tell you, it happens. And when it happens, it's like he'd rather be around his girlfriend than be around me, and it hurts. It hurts.
Exactly.
But I'm glad that we did have that time to hug and for him to lay with me and for us to watch TV together and do the things he likes together. Because or else I'd probably be one of those angry moms that doesn't want to let her son go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with you on that. So affection is a big thing in our
Yeah,
household.
absolutely. And I really encourage you to look up. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Reiki. It's a
Mm-mm.
form of massage.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's like healing, basically
Mm-hmm.
healing massage. So there is real scientific evidence now that we know that affection, it builds your brain.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
because I always like to remind people whenever you're healing, the one of the currencies of healing is stress with
Mm-hmm.
relaxation. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're healing, a lot of people think, "Oh, I'm healing. I'm not going to get it. This shouldn't be extremely stressful." It is extremely stressful, but how you
Mm-hmm.
balance that out is with the relaxation. So while you may have a hard day really digging in with your therapist about a childhood trauma, you leave that and you get a long hug from your son or your daughter or your husband or your best friend. And that is what helps you to be able to continue the journey. So we have to find those ways in which we can soften ourselves on top of
Mm-hmm.
the hard work. Because I was listening to another podcast yesterday and she was talking about overthinking in Black women and how we have this. I don't know if you all know about Do you know Joy DeGruy, post-traumatic slave syndrome? She wrote
Mm-hmm.
a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and she talks about hypervigilance in Black women. Revolutionary concept of understanding that Black women, because of slavery, we have this thing that we do where we try to always make everything perfect.
Oh yes.
Always. Can you touch on that a little bit? This whole idea around Black women always striving, always constantly in push mode almost.
So I think that's what we've been taught, right? I think we've been taught we have to be better. We have to stay on top of our game. We have to cover ourselves and all of those sorts of things, right? So I do think that's why we actually stress ourselves out. We overwhelm ourselves. I know a lot of women. I speak to a lot of women. You would be surprised that are dealing with anxiety. And when I ask them, well, what triggers your anxiety? Being overwhelmed,
Mhm.
because we're trying to balance too much. And not only are we trying to balance too much, but we're trying to do it with excellence, which is great, but we can't do 20 things excellently at the same time. It's just we're just not built to do that. That's just not humanly possible. So I think we have to start giving ourselves some grace and exercising self compassion within ourselves. And I think also with that, with the piece about post traumatic slave syndrome, I also think there's insecurity that we pass down.
Listen,
And I think that insecurity is another thing that causes that perfectionism thing inside of us, the always, wanting to be on point at all times and wanting this, and we got to have that, and we want, our children have to be a certain way, and so on and so forth. And and that's one thing that I've relaxed on with my kids, for me. And I'll tell you, I grew up in that family where if your hair, when you were little, your hair wasn't done, mom will come back inside, and so for me, I've relaxed on that. Like, if you're out playing and your ponytail looks crazy, fine. No one is going to die.
Yeah.
And if anyone is judging me because my child is out playing and her ponytail is crazy, then the problem is on them, not on me. So
What else you got to do?
exactly. I think, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and Black women are suffering from anxiety, majorly. I suffer from anxiety. It's a major deal, within our community that we have to heal.
Yeah, and I think that goes in alignment with one of the things you talk about was just having compassion for yourself.
Mhm,
And especially one, I always try to make a point in my own community to remind moms, especially around this time of the year, that like perfection is not the currency of the holidays.
right.
The
Mhm,
holidays are about taking a break. It
mhm,
is about being able to have some downtime to reinvigorate yourself before the new year.
mhm,
It's not about all of these gifts and all this stuff. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of disappointment
mhm,
and, disappointment coupled with rejection for Black women. I
mhm.
wanted to see if you can touch on that a bit.
Especially the rejection piece, is big for Black women because, let's face it, our first experiences in this country were traumatic, right? As being oppressed and slavery, that's trauma that has never been healed, right? And so then after that, even when you move into the civil rights era, there was a lot of rejection, right? And so that wound for us is very fresh and free. So here it is nowadays, when we experience rejection, we're highly triggered, right? Because we still have an open wound. And I will tell you, the wound of rejection is just so intense and deep because it causes us to question ourselves, right? We look internally and we say, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. We go through the whole list. I'm not skinny enough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have to, that's where self-compassion again comes in. And we have to learn to embrace rejection, even because it's a part of life. We've all been rejected, whether it's you didn't get the job, the guy that you like it, he didn't like you. Maybe your father wasn't there like mine wasn't. Rejection is a part of life, and we have to accept it and also learn to see the benefits of rejection, because sometimes that closed door, let me tell you, I've had many times I look through social media at the guys that I dated back in the day, and it didn't work out, and I'm like, woo, dodge that bullet. And I remember I got laid off from a job that I love, and I was so hurt. That company ended up closing its doors a couple of months later. So we really have to see the benefit, because there's some beauty in rejection, and learn to accept it. Like, it's going to happen. There's nothing you can do to stop rejection from happening. And just realize, you know what? Something else is out there that's better.
Absolutely. And that's a part of, I think, what you said earlier really resonates with me. And I think it will really resonate with all the women who are listening about this idea around, we came into this country as rejects, as
Hmm.
people who had been rejected from society and
Hmm.
who were forced to live on the outskirts, and not only forced to live on the outskirts but also forced to endure some very horrific conditions. And it created within us what I like to call systemic inferiority and systemic insecurity, where we
Very true.
have insecurity in which is goes back to what Najima said earlier when we were has started the conversation about this whole woman work that you have to do, because you have to recognize that the insecurity is not just in one place. You're
Mhm.
not just insecure because you can't find a friend. You're not just insecure because you can't sustain a relationship. It's really this systemic insecurity that's running through your entire life, that
Mhm.
once you really handle the root of that,
Mhm.
handling the root of why you're insecure, doing what African culture calls sankofa, which is going back and fetching
Mhm.
all that old stuff so that you can push it into the forefront, be forced to look at it, re-examine it, decide what goes, what doesn't go, what needs to be thrown away, what agreements we're no longer going to have.
Mhm.
You can't really move forward.
Mhm.
So the emotional wounds must be dealt with, because if
Absolutely.
you don't, that insecurity is not going nowhere. That rejection's not going nowhere. It's going to stay. You're going to consistently confront these same experiences until you deal with it.
Absolutely. 100%. Yep, that's it.
That's it. So we want to know how we can get more involved with the Black Girl's Guide to Healing Emotional Wounds.
Great. So, two things. You can join my website. You can follow me on my website, my newsletters. When as soon as you hit the website, it'll ask if you want to subscribe to the newsletter. Just plug in your email address. Bam, you're
Get
there.
the newsletter.
Get the newsletter. Yes, yes, yes. And as Muffy said, I pour out my heart. I share it all. Um, in the newsletter, it's najimasmalls.com. Also, we have a Facebook group. Just Google in the Black Girl's Guide to Healing Emotional Wounds. We are there. We did a book club um, on the Facebook group, and where we talked about a different chapter of the book, The Black Girl's Guide to Healing Emotional Wounds. And it was so great. So many women opened up and shared, and it was really like we were healing in community. I'm very big on community. It is how we heal when we're in safe spaces.
Yes,
And I am big on that. Our community is safe. We don't attack anybody. We love. We're open and transparent, but we're here to love you to healing. We're not mean girls. I don't do the mean girl thing. Did that years ago. I'm no longer a mean girl. So
mhm.
that's a little way how you can get involved. I'm on Instagram, Naijima Smalls in real life. I'm on Twitter, Naijima S. Just keep in contact with me. Email me, hit me up through the website if you ever have any questions, ladies. I'm here to listen, to help. I want to help anyone that I can to heal and to at least start the journey, because it's so powerful and it's so freeing.
Absolutely. And you all know you can always, always, always listen to this episode as many times as you need to start your healing journey, to make sure that you are doing the whole woman work that we need every single Black woman to do
Yes,
order for us.
yes,
Yeah, every single Black woman has to do this work. So if you are listening to this and you are afraid, know that you can join the Brown Mamas community. You can join Najima's community, Black Girls Guide to Healing Emotional Wounds, to get started. Wherever you find your people
yes.
is where you need to be, because you are the currency of our community.
Absolutely. Well put.
Yeah, if you're not well, we ain't well.
Exactly.
I always like to say a lot of us run around in this world and we forget that weeds and flowers grow together. So while you might be able to keep your little patch safe in the infancy of your life, the older you get, those weeds and flowers, they start to intertwine. And what you thought wasn't going to touch your life yesterday because your girlfriend to live across the street who just been on her island and ain't doing no healing work, you thought she wasn't going to touch you. Well, wait a couple years,
Mm-hmm.
couple years, and she gonna touch you and you gonna touch her. So not only do we need to do our own healing work, but we need to be encouraging other women not to be afraid. And one of the things that Naijama does so beautifully in her book is she gives us a reason not to be afraid,
Absolutely.
gives us a reason because she's doing the work.
Mhm.
So if Naijama can do the work, then I can do the work. If I can do the work, then you can do the work. Then we can do the work. So thank you so much, Naijama, for your transparency and for your love of Black women.
Thank you, Muffy. This has been a great conversation, sis.
Absolutely. I love it. All right. Well, we are done for now. We will see you all. I don't know. Y'all know I upload these episodes when I get good and darn well ready.
Love it. That's the mommy life.
So it might be 4 episodes at one time. So listen, but we will see y'all next time. Thank you so much. And make sure you find Naijama. All of her information will be in the show notes.
Thank you, ladies. Cheers.